Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're doing something a bit different, taking a really profound and honestly necessary look back at the 50th anniversary of one of the absolute deadliest natural disasters of the 20th century. We're talking about the 1976 Tangshan earthquake. This was an event where an entire metropolis was literally erased in a matter of seconds, leaving behind these deep scars that completely reshaped how a nation handles disaster preparedness. So let's skip the usual pleasantries today and just jump right into it. I want you to picture this exact chilling moment. July 28, 1976, at exactly 3:42 and 53 seconds in the morning. At that precise second, a massive magnitude 7.8 earthquake slammed into a sleeping industrial city. The epicenter was right under their beds, at a crazy shallow depth of just 11 kilometers, carrying a devastating intensity of 11 degrees. Section 1. The Darkest Dawn. Now, to really wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this, you have to understand what Tangshan actually was. Back in '76, this wasn't just some random town. It was a massive hub for China's coal, steel, and machinery industries. It was pretty much the economic backbone of North China. And yet all of that massive infrastructure was completely paralyzed in just dozens of seconds. I kind of just want to let this official death toll sit silently for a moment. 242,769 lives lost. It's a number so huge it almost doesn't feel real, right? But we absolutely have to anchor ourselves to the immense human gravity of this event before we start digging into the mechanics of what went wrong. And the devastation didn't stop with the fatalities. Let's break down the rest of these massive figures. Over 164,000 people were heavily injured. Roughly 650,000 civilian buildings just collapsed or were severely damaged. And the direct economic loss was in the billions of RMB, which, to put that into perspective, would translate to hundreds of billions today. Remember, we are talking about 1976 here. No cell phones, no internet, no instant communication. A thriving, bustling city basically just turned to rubble in the absolute pitch black right before dawn. Just listen to how one survivor later remembered it. They said, "When the earthquake came, there was no time to be afraid, only an instinct to flee." Man, that really hits the nail on the head regarding a fatal factor of this disaster: the timing. It struck while families were deep in their sleep. There was virtually zero time to react, let alone escape. Entire families just vanished in their sleep, and these massive, roaring factories were flattened in a heartbeat. Which brings us to Section 2, the warning gap. So here is where things get really complicated, and it brings up the central historical tension of the Tangshan earthquake. Was there a warning? Could this have been prevented? This timeline shows the agonizingly short gap between a major scientific win and a totally devastating systemic failure. See, just a year prior, in 1975, the Haichang earthquake was actually one of the few successfully predicted earthquakes in world history. It led to mass evacuations. Because of that, people literally thought, hey, we can predict these things now. And leading up to July 76 in Tangshan, they did detect anomalies, changes in groundwater, increased minor tremors, animals acting really weird. But those scientific red flags never translated into any effective public action. The huge takeaway here isn't just that no one listened, it's that when there's a breakdown between scientific warning, government decision-making, and public safety, disasters are magnified exponentially. And to make matters worse, the tragedy was really compounded in the aftermath. The international community, including countries like the US and Japan, jumped in right away and offered rescue assistance. However, because of the very specific, complex political climate of 1976, those offers for international aid were declined. Foreign rescue teams were not allowed into the disaster zone. Today, of course, we all know that in a natural disaster, time equals life. But that historical decision in Tangshan actually paved the way for the modern understanding we have today. The professional rescue, using specialized teams, search dogs, and life-detecting gear, has to be borderless. When you're face-to-face with human lives on the line, humanity and professionalism just have to take priority over politics. Section 3. The Qinglong Miracle. Now, amidst all this massive systemic failure, there's actually this incredibly powerful, totally contrasting story of proactive risk management. It's known as the Qinglong Miracle. In Tangshan, as we saw, there was no clear public warning, resulting in massive, massive casualties. But then you look at Qinglong County. Despite being just 115 kilometers away, which is well within the severe impact zone, out of roughly 470,000 residents, there were 0 deaths. Seriously, 0.
How is that even possible? Well, it all came down to the proactive, gutsy decisions made by one local leader, County Magistrate Ran Guangqi. Magistrate Ran received the exact same murky, unclear data about potential seismic activity as everyone else. But he didn't wait around. He took immediate action. One, he mobilized the masses, straight up telling officials to warn everyone not to sleep in dangerous buildings. Two, he organized the construction of outdoor temporary earthquake shelters. And three, he mandated home inspections to get rid of indoor hazards. You have to realize, in 1976, issuing a false alarm carried immense political risk. If the earthquake hadn't happened, his career, and maybe worse, could have been over. But he took on that risk to protect his people. He proved for sure that preparing for uncertain risks saves lives. It was such an incredible act of leadership that the United Nations actually officially recognized it 20 years later in 1996.
Section 4. Unseen Human Scars.
Let's zoom in for a second. To understand the true micro-level cost of this disaster, we kind of have to look away from the macro statistics and focus on the deeply personal. There's a specific, heartbreaking story from the source author's own family. The author had a cousin, a college senior living in Tangshan at the time. She was at that beautiful stage of life, just about to graduate. She had actually bought a train ticket to head back home to Beijing for July 29th. So the night of the earthquake was supposed to be her very last night in Tangshan before starting this whole new chapter. But at 3:42 a.m., her life and all her dreams were permanently cut short. She never got to graduate or start her career or see the future of her country. To her family, she isn't just a historical statistic. She's a sister, a daughter, a whole life that was violently interrupted. And even decades later, they still feel that profound absence.
Because honestly, survival was really just the beginning. For the people who did live through it, the end of the shaking didn't mean the end of the pain. Countless survivors suffered from deep post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. For decades, elderly survivors were literally terrified of the nighttime. Just a loud noise or a bed shaking slightly would trigger this immediate, overwhelming instinct to run. These victims had to spend decades trying to relearn how to trust their own homes, how to believe that the ceiling wasn't going to suddenly crush them, and how to believe that tomorrow would actually come.
This ongoing trauma became a massive theme in Chinese literature and film as the entire culture tried to process the grief. You see it in works like Chen Gong's incredible reportage, The Great Tangshan Earthquake, or Zhang Ling's novel Aftershock, and definitely in the film adaptation by Fang Xiaogong. That film doesn't just show the 30 seconds of the quake itself. It dives deep into a mother's sheer agony over losing a child, and the decades of psychological struggle that came after. The true disaster isn't just the physical destruction of a city, it's the decades of life that people have to live in its shadow.
Section 5. Lessons for the Future. So here we are 50 years later. Almost 2 whole generations have passed, and a new, bustling Tangshan has been rebuilt right on top of those ruins. But commemorating Tangshan isn't just about looking back at the pain. It's about asking ourselves some pretty direct, hard questions today. Do we actually respect science and listen to early warnings? Do we prioritize human life above all the administrative tape and political concerns? And when the worst happens, are we willing to swallow our pride and accept all possible help? The contrast between Tangshan's systemic failure and Qinglong's proactive success is still a stark, incredibly relevant lesson in disaster management.
I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Disasters destroy buildings, but will they destroy our ability to learn? An earthquake leveled an entire city, reminding us of the extreme fragility of life, but also the immense importance of taking responsibility. As we wish true peace for the hundreds of thousands of victims who never became more than a memory, and peace for the survivors who carried the heavy weight of that night, we've got to challenge ourselves. We have to ensure that the true cost of these systemic failures is never forgotten, so that the next time the earth shakes, we are actually ready. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. See you next time.